Hi, I'm Mark Clegg for the Photographer Academy and welcome to the Flash Facts series. This is where I've broken down the secrets or the problems or the techniques of flash photography, whether you're a Speedlite photographer or you're just getting started with your off-camera flash, or you're kind of more advanced, or you're looking to get into studio flash photography. I'm trying to unravel the techniques for you so you can understand fully what the different settings are, how to best get going. Plus, we're going to look at pros and cons of each different section, as well as some tips and things really. So the Flash series, you can obviously watch lots of video content on the Academy website itself, but the Flash Facts series is breaking down each section at a time for you. Hope you enjoy it. So we're talking manual flash. It doesn't matter if we're using the likes of a Speedlite or we're using studio flash. This is where the manual control of the actual flash is being set by you and its power. Now, the first thing, if you're just getting going with flash, you've got to remember that it depends on what flash units you have, what manufacturer units you have, how old your flash is, and it doesn't matter if it's a studio flash or a Speedlite flash. They could have all different powers, ranging in a difference in 1 to 5 stops. Okay, so it's all about power. So when we're talking about manual flash, we're talking about what your flash that you own today can physically do. Now, most Speedlites will have the ability to go into a manual flash mode. That is where, if I just switch on my Speedlite for a minute and I press my button, the mode button, and I just flick through it until I get to the M. And the M designates that it's in manual mode. Once it's in manual mode, we're in control of the power. If we're not in manual mode, basically the Speedlite combined with the camera settings will be taking control of how much power is put through the Speedlite. The output, as far as its a blipper flash or a burster flash is concerned, all right? How long the gas is being exploded for, is xenon gas in here, yeah. So basically, once we've put it into manual mode, the key things that we want to do is to make sure we're fixing the flash in its distance to the subject. We're probably also going to be using our cameras in a manual mode as well, but you can use some camera settings with manual flash as well, okay? But obviously you can combine an automatic flash on, an automatic camera setting with a manual flash, but it all depends on your ability and the camera itself, of course. But look, let's get back to it. I believe that manual flash is a really good place to start. The reason for that is that you start to learn immediately what your flash can do. We all fear things, but it's better to actually try them out in the comfort of your own living room and basically just switch the flash on to M mode. And what happens if I do this? Now, the first things first, when we switch the flash on to M mode, you're going to realize that you've got some ability to change the output of the flash. If it's at 1:1, like you can see on screen here, basically what that means, it's at full power. Now the flash can then change through the different settings, as you can see. So 1:1, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/28. Okay, the 1/128 is the lowest power setting of the flash itself in manual mode. Now, you just don't change the flash in the the clicks. Once upon a time, that was basically how it worked in Speedlite flash and studio flash. In fact, you could only turn it up by 1 notch at a time. But with settings, you've usually got at least a half change. So in other words, 1/2 between the next setting as such. So between the 1:1 and the 1:2, there would be a middle notch to actually put it to. And in studio flash photography, that would work in exactly the same way. But the modern Speedlite basically allows you to move in 1/3 clicks between going from one to another, which allows you a greater control of your Speedlite, of course. Now remember that power all depends on your flash model and your flash type as well as its age and things. Let's quickly look at some kind of pros, cons and tips to do with manual flash first. So in the consistent exposure for every shot, what do I mean by that? We need to set the Speedlite up and measure its distance to subject. And we usually use a light meter to kind of record that amount of power, and that will give us an aperture information. So if I've got a Speedlite and it's fitted with an umbrella and I shoot through it, basically I might get something like f2.8 and it on half power mode if it's at 5 feet away. However, if I move the light closer to the subject by physically moving the light, then that light would increase. So in that kind of consistency of exposure, we would actually go against that pro if we allow the flash to be moved closer to the subject or the subject closer to the flash, and we don't remeter, we don't change the settings itself. And that's where we would usually use the TTL mode if the subject is moving around all the time or the camera is moving around. But what it does, it gives me consistent exposure every single time, especially for people photography and pet photography and so on, when the subject's in a static place, because we can predict what we're going to change the quality of the light with what we're going to bounce the light through or shine through or kind of bounce off. We're trying to get a consistency of the exposure. We're looking to have predictable results as well. I think that's the one thing that you'll soon learn with manual flash photography, is that it will give you predictable images every single time, because you know how your manual flash is going to perform if you fit it with a diffuser cap or a softbox or whatever it is. You get to control the power, so that means we can also over control any kind of light within a room, or we can kind of control the ambient fully, or a sky, by taking total control, or bringing more of the room light available because we want to work with a more sensitive ISO or a slower shutter speed as such, and we can then actually decide on how much flash we're going to need to actually illuminate a certain part of the subject or the room within our kind of setup as such. The cons are obviously the obvious. You know, if you don't set it up right, you're going to get bad exposure. So if you move the flash closer to the subject, the exposure is going to be wrong. It does take a little bit more time to set up, and a confidence element with that as well. I can walk into a room, put a flash on a stand, decide on what accessory I'm going to use, basically put my meter near the subject's face, point the meter towards the light source, i.e. the flash, take the exposure, read in with it, and I'm basically shooting within a few minutes. What I'm then not going to do is have to kind of change my aperture all the time, because the flash is thinking for me and it's changing the camera settings perhaps. The con again is you're in control of the power. So in other words, if you set it up wrong, it's going to be wrong. You will need to control the shutter speed. And if you can't set your your flash on a manual mode, you might want to actually check your camera settings in case you're working in an automatic mode and the camera is telling the flash you can't work in manual mode when I'm in this camera mode as such, like program mode or whatever. And again, if the camera is going to ignore things, we've got to be able to actually know how to overcome those things, of course. So some tips are: use when the subject and the flash is static. That really does get you great results every time without any real headaches. Meter with a flash meter if possible, or actually take a little bit of time to observe the kind of the histogram on the back of your camera. Avoid the full power, because it's going to drain your batteries very, very fast unless you're using an external battery as well. Avoid from shooting too fast. You can get into the habit of that, especially when you're shooting on very low power flash, because that can actually burn and almost start to melt the actual plastic on the front of the flash. And I do believe that, you know, manual flash is a really good place to kind of start within things. So once we've kind of put the camera into the manual mode I usually use when I'm shooting studio flash as well as Speedlite flash. I'm then going to put my Speedlite into manual mode like I was just showing you, switch it on, get it into the M mode. If I want to change the power of the flash, then remember all I need to do is press the middle dial. So if I switch it on, he says switching it on, I make sure that I'm in M mode, and then all I need to do is press the plus and minus on here, and then actually use the joggle wheel to actually turn the power down or turn the power up, depends on what I want to do. Like I was saying to you, if I fix the distance from subject to camera, like I have here, yes, from it to me, then if I take the exposure and I kind of set that on my camera, then I've got a perfect exposure each time, as long as that doesn't move at all, or I change its quality. In other words, I take the outer diffuser off, or I bounce it off an umbrella and so on. You get the idea of what I'm on about. But manual flash will give you great results, especially if you're looking at more creative ideas like off-camera flash to completely overpower the ambient. You can have some really, really great effects time after time. And especially if you combine it with other techniques like high-speed sync and so on with it, you can then actually completely overpower skies by kind of walking into a scene going, I know what to do here. I meter for the ambient light within my scene. I basically say I want to overpower the sky by 2 stops. Can my Speedlite do this? If so, I set my shutter speed first into a high shutter speed, 200 plus as it were, and then I'm going to use an aperture that is going to be 2 stops more than the ambient light. So if the ambient light is say 5.6, if I overpower the ambient by say 2 stops, which would give me 11, all I need to do then is put my flash in a position and make sure I meter the flash to give me a working exposure of f11, and I can guarantee my results. So manual flash is a bit of a headache, a bit of a minefield when you start off, but I promise you, once you've got the confidence with the manual flash, you will never ever look back with it. So if you'd like to know more about the Photographer Academy, head over to thephotographeracademy.com and go over to the lighting section here, and you can see that there's lots of different topics and content for you to go ahead and actually watch immediately. As a member, you'll be able to actually click in and then watch and download the films. To join, just click onto the Join Academy on the website kind of links, and it'll just bring it over to here. And as you can see, you can join for as little as £33 for 3 months. But in addition, of course, it's not just our film content. There's also lots of other assets to download, including brushes for Photoshop, smart objects for Photoshop, 100 backgrounds for you to use, as well as actions. Plus, we've got some great visual posing guide apps for you to download and put onto your smart device.